Hello. Welcome to the Ask Dr. Be Good podcast, where we take interesting public education subjects and talk about them and hopefully make them more understandable. And in this case today, we're going to talk about the STAAR test. The STAAR test is one that we in public education in Texas have come to, let's say we have a lot of emotions around it, but let's just use the word prepare for. So before we get started, let's go around the room and see who we have with us today.
I'm Stacy Maxwell, and I'm the Academic Systems Director for the district, but also, more importantly, the District Testing Coordinator.
I'm Matthew Nielsen, and I am the Information Technology Manager for Legacy Preparatory Charter Academy.
And then we will also have Dr. Mann, who will be joining us. She is our Special Ed Coordinator for the district, and she will be sharing information about what we do with our special populations when it comes to STAAR. As I said, STAAR is our state test that grades 3 through 8 and 9 and 10 in a perfect Texas world test. Now, I say that especially with the high school. High school has 5 end of courses that we'll call EOCs, end of courses, and they take 3 out of those 5 starting in freshman year because we want to make sure that they have 4 years to pass them if they don't pass them the first time. And so, Stacy, why don't you check me? I'm going to rattle off the tests that we have to give our kids starting in 3rd grade, and then you correct me if I'm wrong. In 3rd grade, we give reading and math. We used to have to do science there, but they've taken that one out. And they've also, and how do I know that? Because I used to teach 3rd grade. And so in 4th grade, they have 3 tests. They have reading, math, and writing. 5th grade has 3 tests, reading, math, and science. In 6th grade, they have 2 tests, reading and math. In 7th grade, they have 3 tests, reading, math, and writing. In 8th grade, they have 4 tests, reading, math, science, and social studies. In 9th grade, they have 3 tests, biology 1, English 1, algebra 1. And then 10th grade has
English 2.
English 2 and world history? Or
World history is in 11th grade.
So geography?
No, just world history in 11th grade. You have English 2 in 10th grade.
What's the in there? There's a 5th test.
Yep, you have them all. Biology, algebra, English 1, English 2, and U.S. history.
U.S. history.
Now, of course, at Legacy, we do the 2 optional tests, which are English 3 and Algebra 2 as well, which can actually do well for the children because it replaces the TSI if they score high enough.
And we've talked about in other podcasts the TSI in our college readiness podcast that we've done 2 or 3 times already. But it's always good to remind, especially our elementary parents, that we are preparing your elementary school children for 9th grade college. And just as a reminder, because goodness knows we don't test our kids enough, we want to prepare our 8th graders for the TSI by giving them TSI prep during rotations in 8th grade so that at the end of the 8th grade, they take the TSI, and if they get a high enough scale score, then they qualify the following year to take some of our dual credit courses. Okay, so we've gotten the testing contents and grades out. One of the interesting things that we've learned recently is that the STAAR tests are actually above grade level. So that is another reason, and it adds to our urgency around making sure that we have our parents and our teachers really on alert about preparing for the test. And I'll read this out of this is a doctorate dissertation on the STAAR test reading levels, and what they found was, and this is not the only resource, it's just the latest resource that has come in, and it says that the 3rd grade test was written at a 5th grade level. Grade 4 was written at a 7th grade level. Grade 5 was written at a 7th grade level. Grade 6 was written at a 7th to low 8th grade level. Grade 7 was written at an 8th grade level, and grade 8 was, interestingly enough, written at the 7th grade level, so one grade level below. Maybe it's because they take 4 tests and they took pity on them.
Maybe.
You know, so we'll talk at the end of the podcast, towards the end, about some of the choices parents have, but certainly our choice right now is to make sure that we prepare our 3 through 10th grade children to take these tests and to do well on them. How do we do that? Well, one of the things that we are doing is already starting our Saturday school for some grades. Stacy, why are we starting Saturday school already?
Well, we actually have our first round of testing starting April 9th, and that's for 4th and 7th grade writing, 5th and 8th grade reading and math, English 1 and English 2. So we actually want to target those students ahead of the other ones to make sure that they're ready, because we have less instructional time with them during the school year.
Right. And so 2 weeks ago, we started Saturday school. And one of the things that we did was to ask our kinder through 2nd grade teachers, our elective teachers who don't test, and our central staff to take turns spelling our testing teachers who have to come on Saturday, so that not every teacher has to come, every testing teacher has to come every Saturday. We're really trying not to be in the business of burning out our teachers. And so having our other non-testing staff help out is part of what we've implemented. And sure enough, even I have gotten involved. We also do tours of the campuses on Saturday since we're already open. And so I was touring last week at Plano while letting the director there have a Saturday off while making my husband tutor math. Nobody's safe. And he actually enjoyed it. So I always ask, will you come back and do it again? Yes. Okay. So that's how serious we are about making sure that our kids get as much support as they need to make sure that they have a good showing on the STAAR test. Now, a good showing on the STAAR test is different than it was even a few years ago, and even when I was in the classroom and we had other type of state tests. We had the tabs and the teams and the text.
And the toss.
Yes. Now we have, and it's good, and it's a gift and a curse. We're going to talk a little bit about the accountability piece for STAAR, and it's very, very complicated. And so I didn't want to go deeply into it, but I do want to explain that we have something called approaches. It starts with approaches,
meets,
and masters. And we know that for our goal setting for our district, we must have 70% of our students get to approaches. 44 to 46% of our students get to meets, and 20% get to mastery. Now, those do not add up to 100, because what happens is that the meets and masters folds under the approaches, and so they count either twice or 3 times. So we have to keep our eye on the data, certainly, and we're doing that very closely by child. But making sure that we grow each child is now the key, and that's the good part in this.
Mm-hmm.
If we find a silver lining in all of this accountability, all of this assessment, it is that the way that the state counts kids is by how much they grew from last year's test. And so our job is to make sure they do grow. And so what that means for some of our struggling learners is that if they, let's say that they did a low approaches or even a did not meet, because there is a did not meet, we just don't want to dwell there because that's the lowest of the low, right? But we want to make sure that we can show that we have grown our kids from one level to the next, at least in 1 year. And so when we do that, it counts as a positive. And so interestingly enough, if we have a child that was a low meets, but now they're a high meets, they might actually be counted as a pass because it showed that they grew from the past year. So those are some of the positives. All right, so what else do we do, Stacy, to help prepare
Well,
for just the whole testing environment?
well, that's a huge thing, because when the kids go into a testing environment, it's completely different than regular school. So one of the things that we are doing is next week we will be doing the mock STAAR, which we do with our whole school. And basically grades 3 and up will take a release test of the STAAR, and they will practice how the testing environment is going to be. So it's twofold. So basically, first the students get to practice, but also the teachers and the testing coordinators get to practice on their campus. So when we do get to the real STAAR, it will run smoothly, and that's what we're looking for.
Because let's talk just briefly on testing violations. What does that mean? When I say testing violations, what am I talking about?
Oh, testing violations. There are 2 different kinds of irregularities through the state. So you can have a procedural irregularity, which is pretty simple. It could be someone's cell phone going off. It could be we hand the kid the wrong test booklet. It could be that we don't give someone accommodations that they need. And those are fairly simple fixes. Or we can talk about serious irregularities, which would be people giving out answers,
Teacher leaving the room with the test booklets
Yes.
in there with the kids.
not being secured. Those kind of things are serious irregularities. So
We've never had any of those.
No, we haven't had any serious irregularities. Procedural irregularities, yeah.
Well, we've got humans in those
Yeah, I
buildings.
know.
Yeah.
But basically, our goal throughout the testing season is not to have any irregularities at all, because we just want everything to go as smoothly as possible. We don't want any mix-ups.
So how do we assure that we don't have any testing violations, even the small minor ones?
Well, the first thing we do is we train our teachers, we train our testing coordinators. We talk about the law, we talk about the violations and what can happen as a result of those violations. Then we also make sure that everything's secure, and I'm always on one of the campuses during testing week, and we have other central administrators on other campuses to kind of monitor the situation and make sure everything is running smoothly. I'm always on call on those weeks, and whenever someone has a question, they can call me, and I have a hotline to Region 10 where I call them if I have questions, or to TEA and call them with questions. But seriously, open lines of communication, serious training on what's going on during testing week, and just monitoring.
So testing has gotten a little high tech. How has it gotten high tech?
Well, testing now is going to start going towards the online mode. We've already been doing it with our ELL learners and our SPED learners and our 504 students, and they've been able to get online and use the accommodations through the online testing platform. But now, as the state's going more towards that platform, we're starting to have to train our gen ed kids to go start moving towards the online testing instead of the paper format.
So Matthew, what does that mean for a district? Districts didn't used to need IT managers, or didn't need a lot of them. We're a small district and we have 3 IT people right now. Why do we need that many?
Yeah, so we're talking about administering the state assessment online. That's every kid, 3rd through 8th grade, all of the 9th graders, all of the 10th graders, quite a few of the 11th and 12th graders as well. So you're talking about a single day where we have several hundred kids on a device at one time. That's very demanding on the logistics of distributing those devices, and it's also very demanding on the network of our school. And when they've come out with these new online methods, the state's also released a lot of best practices for IT departments. We have to do a lot of, before the day of testing, we have to do a lot of bandwidth testing to make sure that we're going to be able to accommodate enough network speed for all of those users doing the testing. We've got to make sure that we've got those devices ready to go in the places that they need to be for the kids to use them. And if an issue happens during the test, we've got to make sure that we've got people ready to respond to support those users. So that takes a lot of manpower.
One of the things I've had to learn, and I probably am not saying it right, but whenever we have to do a state test online, the devices have to be readied. How are they, what do you have to do to ready them?
So for the STAAR assessment program, it's what's called a lockdown browser. So we can distribute that on any type of Apple device, Windows device, or Chrome device. But the thing that's similar between all the platforms is that you have to make sure that there's no other applications that might interfere with that. One of the remote management applications we use allows me to connect to a computer from my computer to help. And, we've got to make sure that those features are disabled, because that can open the opportunity for some of those testing irregularities that we don't want to have. We don't want to have our staff to be given the ability to remotely view a student as they're taking the test. So that's one of the processes that goes through when we ready those devices. Some of the other things are really kind of more simple, making sure that they're fully charged and making sure that they have the application installed on the device. Those are very important steps.
So as you were talking, I was remembering also that not only do we have to do this with hundreds of devices, but then we got the graphing calculators on top of that, right?
Yes. So usually we enlist the help of one of the math teachers to clear all of the graphing calculators. So they have to be cleared of all memory, because they store a lot of problems and answers in the
Formulas,
devices.
yeah.
And then they have to be put into testing mode. And so that's a long process. And so usually the math teachers come in and they start clearing things for us about a week ahead of time.
Yeah, because we're literally talking 200 or 300 kids testing math with those calculators.
Yes.
Because
And often on the same day.
And then making sure we have battery power and oh my gosh.
Make sure
yeah.
they're charged, make sure everything's up and running, ready to go, make sure the classrooms have enough of the devices.
Yeah, there's so much behind the scenes things that are going on that kids, parents, and even teachers aren't really privy to that make or break a good testing day, which we won't even go into what happens when we have our kids testing online and the state's
Server goes down.
yeah.
That's fine.
Let's not talk about that. That's happened 3
But-
summers in a row.
But the thing is that, the communication between Matt and myself is very good, and we start readying these things probably months in advance to make sure that everything goes smoothly.
The state's got better with that as well, reporting issues that they know are coming to us so that we can better prepare for them.
So you had talked about our special populations testing. So I had asked Dr. Mann to talk to us a little bit about that, because we have not only our 12% special ed in Plano, 8 or 9% in Mesquite, we have, I think 43% is English learners now, second language kids. So we have a lot of our special populations who have to test online. And just not only online, I need to make the switch. This is STAAR, to have to test STAAR. And so let's hear from Dr. Mann on how we prepare our special populations. Thank you for being here, Dr. Mann. I appreciate you taking the time to answer some questions about testing, STAAR testing for our special populations. Can you talk a little bit about our TEA policy around special population testing for STAAR?
TEA accessibility policies apply to any student taking STAAR, and it depends on his or her needs and if they meet certain eligibility requirements. There are 3 main categories when it comes to accessibility that TEA outside of STAAR Alt 2 in which a student may be eligible for and qualify for. The first one is what we call accessibility features, and these features apply to any student, whether they have a disability or not. These are things that if a student benefit from them in the regular classroom doing regular instructions, they are entitled to, and there's no extra need for IEP or services. Some of those accessibility features are various types of scratch paper, dry erase boards, any magnifying devices, or any kind of highlighters or colored pencils.
How about dictionaries?
Yes, for certain content. Yes, in certain grade levels. Yes, ma'am. And then you have the second type of accessibility feature, which we come into where we have to have consent from TEA. These are features and supports that have to be approved by TEA, and it's also, these supports must be decided upon in an ARD meeting by an ARD committee. An ARD committee convenes to determine the needs of the students and to discuss what particular accommodations the students may benefit from in the instructional environment, which then allows it to carry over to be used in the tested environment.
Now, remind me, in the old days, we used to have to gather our facts as we knew it based on kid need, send the accommodations down to TA through Region 10, was it? One of those things, and then they would yay or nay it, and then we were allowed to use them. Is that still in place?
That goes into what we called the third area of needs for accommodations, and that would fall under designated supports that requires TEA approval.
Okay.
Now, the second designated supports that do not require TEA approval,
Like?
for example, first of all, they are the ones that are approved locally in the ARD meeting, no prior approval from TA. And some of these examples that we most commonly use in our charter program is basic transcribing. For example, if the test administrator may be able to complete some items in the textbook for a student. For example, if they're taking paper, if they have problems with fine motor skills and they can't bubble inside of the little small ovals, or if they're online taking the test online, if there's a reason of physical disability which limits them to be able to maneuver the mouse or the keyboard. Also, calculation aids. These do not require prior approval from TEA if the kid is using them in the class. They include basic calculators. They also include, for some students, it might be actually having physical counters that they can touch and manipulate. It also includes, for some kids who qualify, addition grids and also multiplication grids. And then for our online takers, we have what we call content and language supports. These are limited to only students who are taking it online, and it's very useful because the students are able to, for example, they're able to hover over a word if they need that word to be defined. They're able to have access a calculator right there via the computer. They're also able to highlight passages and press to have those passages read aloud to them while they're taking the test. And those are only limited to online takers. But we mimic that. That brings us to the next category of items that students may qualify for, which is our oral administration. For the kids who are not taking STAAR online, they may have oral administration. So as far as what the computer would do, as far as reading aloud those test questions, the test administrator will be able to read aloud those for the students. Also, some kids are allowed to use mnemonic devices for math or English. They're also able to have spelling assistance. For example, some kids are allowed for the writing portion of the test to have a copy of frequently misspelled words. And so what that means is individually to the kid and it's individual to the grade level. And ahead of time, before the state assessment, this list has been generated. This is a list that the student has been using.
Thank you. Now, you had talked about accommodations and modifications several times, so let's talk a little bit about what those are. What is the difference between an accommodation and a modification?
Accommodations, well, we'll talk about modifications first. Modifications are what is described as a change in the curriculum or the measurement of how the learning is assessed. And it's for a student, for example, if a student is about three or more grade levels before and cannot assess the TEKS or the standards, then the curriculum can be modified so that that student can assess what we call the prerequisites. And they're able to get the TEKS, but they have to begin at what we call the prerequisites before they go into the actual TEKS. This is where the curriculum will be changed ever so slightly as far as the instruction. This means that a student may qualify for a reduced number of assignments, or some assignments may be removed altogether. And then also this qualifies a student for what we call an alternate rating system, where because they're on a modified curriculum, the grading system that's allowed to them will be based on that curriculum that's modified for their accessibility. So students, for example, with a modified curriculum will be eligible. That's one of the eligibilities for students to take the STAAR Alt 2. And the STAAR Alt 2, which we'll talk about a little bit later, is for those students with that significant cognitive delay.
So if I was a teacher and I wanted to serve, differentiate with my special paths, I've got a baby that's struggling, been labeled special ed, and I want to give him or her 2 test question choices instead of 4. Would that be an accommodation or modification?
So that's a very good question, Dr. Good. And we can talk about how it could be a modification, how it could be a accommodation. It would be a modification to the curriculum if, for example, if the regular curriculum and the tests required for a total of 4 test questions. And if you decide to say, I'm going to only give 2, then you're modifying that curriculum, that you're modifying that assessment. But it could be serve as an accommodation if you say, well, the regular curriculum calls for 4 questions altogether. However, I'm going to accommodate the environment. I'm going to adapt the test so that I will present 2 questions at a time. I will chunk the test questions as opposed to giving all 4. So when you take away or remove assignments or the rigor or the requirement, then you have modified that curriculum, that assignment. But when you manipulate the environment or the instructional material to allow the student to be accessible to the content, then you have merely just provided accommodations.
So if I'm asking because we have new teachers and they get confused. If I were to say to my class, I'm going to read the test to all of you today. This is a quiz, a Friday quiz. I'm going to read it to all of you. That would be an accommodation. But if I said to you, Dr. Mann, I think that Johnny needs to have his STAAR test read to him, then that would be a modification that would be necessary through an ARD. Is that correct?
I see where you're going. That is, if we want to modify, that would be correct. Anytime we do modification or anytime we do any kind of accommodation to a STAAR assessment, it has to be an ARD committee decision. If the teacher's merely going to provide that, be nice and provide that to everybody, then that's kind of goes with the accessibility. Every kid in the classroom can benefit from that. But anytime we're talking about a student specifically needing something different than what the general ed population students will receive, then that requires an ARD committee, whether we're modifying or providing accommodations that are not available to the gen ed students as well.
Thank you, Dr. Mann.
Can you now talk to us about what we do with those special ed kids that have a lower cognitive ability? Different than our learning disabled. Many of our learning disabled kids have normal to high intelligence IQs, but some of our kids do have a cognitive disability that prevents them from being on grade level. What do we do with those kids?
TEA has designed what is called STAAR Alternate 2 to assess students in grades 3 through 8 in high school who have significant cognitive disability delays. And there's several criteria in which the students must qualify. For example, Texas has a definition and defines significant cognitive disability as a student who performs normally about 3 or more grade levels below their typical assigned grade. They have behavior deficits in their ability to plan and to reason and to comprehend. Also, a student may have these deficit in their ability for social skills and to apply practical thinking skills to everyday life situations, or what we call social functioning and life functioning skills. This TEA says that this is, eligibility has to be for a student who condition is not temporary, and is not limited to just one particular content area. And then lastly, which some folks may find frustrating, is that TE says just because a student has not exhibited success previously on a STAAR assessment does not qualify them on the sole basis of not performing successfully on a STAAR assessment to take STAAR out too. It has to be those that severe cognitive delay, which normally translate to about 3 or more grade levels before their assigned grade level.
Thank you.
One of the things that we haven't talked about yet, and we've talked a lot about the STAAR in a short period of time, is the movement by some parents to want to opt out of the test. And every year I have parents who ask me about this, and I can only go to the law. And statute 26.010 clearly states that a parent does not have the authority to remove a student to avoid a test. Further, section 26.010B limits the application of section 26.010 to exclude grade level or graduation requirements. And what that means is that we have graduation requirements, for example, the 5 end of course tests that are required to graduate. And so we cannot graduate a child without those 5 tests. So having those kids not take those tests hurts them in that way. What I would encourage parents to do is, if they want a voice, to contact their legislators. We used to have 21
Something like that. It was a large number.
21 tests or 18 tests. There were a lot of end of courses that when it first came out, that were going to be required to graduate. In essence, what they were doing was putting an end of course after every grade level content, basic content. So there would be at least, one math for the 4 years, one reading, one science, one social studies. That's 16 right there. And then I think they added another.
They had separate tests for English 1, for reading and writing, kind of thing.
Yeah, they just had a lot of tests. And the reason it's down to 5 right now is because a group of parents got together and made enough noise down with their legislators to get that changed. And so please understand, parents, that the school has to follow the Texas law, and our law is to test every student that is in a testing grade. But if you want to do something different, again, contacting your legislators is the place to start. So we have talked a lot about STAAR, what it is, what grade levels, what you can do to, we haven't really, the one thing that you might, Stacy, you might want to do is to talk about what do we do to prepare our kids for a STAAR assessment.
Well, for Legacy, we have Tuesdays and Thursdays tutoring, and our tutoring has become very targeted in instruction as far as what the kids need to succeed. Also, Dr. Good had already talked about the Saturday school, and we have so many talented individuals that are there to work with the kids every Saturday. And if you are not utilizing these, I would encourage you to do so.
Now, what we didn't say was right now it's only for grades 4, 5, 7, 8,
And
9,
English 1 and English 2.
10.
Mm-hmm.
When will the next Saturday school for the other tested grades start?
That starts at the end of February.
All right.
Also, you have educational software, and your kids have the passwords and the websites. It's all web-based. Very easy for them to get on at home and utilize those. Also, as the test approaches, like before testing day, make sure that your students are well rested before the test. Make sure they get to bed on time. They get a good hearty breakfast in the morning, no sugary foods or anything else, lots of proteins, and keep stress to a minimum. Okay, the kids are already stressed out enough about the test because there's a lot of pressure on them. But the fighting at home, anything that's, rushing them out the door, anytime a kid has a bad morning, it sets their whole day on a bad stream. So if we can keep the stress to a minimum and make sure that, we were getting our kids to school in a good mood on those days, that would be fabulous. Just one more thing I want to mention, that during testing weeks, all of the buildings are closed. So there's no outside visitors allowed into the buildings, and that is just because of test security. So,
And that's not only parents, that's anybody.
yeah, that's anyone. We do not allow anyone. So we're in complete lockdown mode.
Right. All right. Well, we have come towards the end of the show. We sometimes have time for the Ask Dr. Be Good a question. We don't today, but I think that the information we had was strong enough to not do that part. And thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Matthew, for being here, Dr. Mann. And I hope that if you have questions that you will contact us about the STAAR. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Ask Dr. Be Good show. For more information on Legacy Preparatory Charter Schools, visit our website, legacypca.com, or call 469-249-1099. And remember to like us on Facebook, where we stream live weekly Tuesdays at 3 p.m.